Mark Winger, convinced that he would be charged with taking the life of Roger Harrington, was deeply troubled, but in reality, the police considered him a victim. The investigation at the crime scene confirmed this. In Roger's car, parked near the Winger house, investigators found a cold weapon, burglary tools, and a scrap of paper with Mark's full name, home address, and the time of the crime, 4:30 p.m. Moreover, it became known that several years ago, Roger had undergone treatment at a psychiatric clinic. Furthermore, Detective Charlie Cox had previously dealt with this young man when he was detained for beating his own wife. "You saved your wife's life by stopping the criminal. You are a real hero," Detective Cox stated with unwavering confidence, addressing Mark Winger. The very next day after the tragedy, the prosecutor issued a statement indicating that Mark's actions were classified as self-defense, and no charges would be brought against him. The case was closed. The parents of the deceased Donna, stunned by the tragic events, fully supported their son-in-law, who had now become a widower. The entire Springfield community rallied around the man who had lost his beloved wife and the mother of his daughter Bailey. People believed that Mark was an exemplary family man whose life had been destroyed by a crazy taxi driver. The only ones who had doubts about this version of events were Roger Harrington's relatives. His sister Barbara, who knew her brother better than anyone else, insisted in conversations with the police that Roger would never have committed such a heinous crime. She begged the detectives to reopen the investigation but was refused. Helen, Roger's mother, was afraid to even go outside, as the whole town considered her son a dangerous psychopath and killer. The Harrington family quietly mourned their loss, realizing that they were unlikely to find support in society. However, they were not the only ones troubled by doubts. Detective Doug Williamson, who was also working on the case, had certain suspicions. In his opinion, something in the story told by Mark Winger did not add up. But aside from Williamson, no one else wanted to delve into the details of this seemingly obvious incident. The police leadership rejected the detectives' request to continue the investigation. The case was permanently closed. After Donna's death, Mark continued to care for their adopted daughter Bailey, but over time, it became increasingly difficult for him to cope with all the responsibilities alone. So, 5 months after losing his wife, the widower decided to hire an assistant, a nanny named Rebecca Simic. Feelings flared between Mark and Rebecca, and soon the woman discovered she was pregnant. 9 months later, the couple had a daughter, Anna. Almost immediately after that, the happy parents got married. A year passed. Mark sold the house and severed all ties with the relatives of his late wife, Donna. Together with Rebecca, Bailey, and newborn Anna, they moved to the suburbs of Springfield. Later, the family welcomed 2 more children, Maggie and Ben. It seemed that life for Mark and his new family had settled into a familiar routine until Donna's close friend, Dana Schultz, made an unexpected confession. For 4 years, the woman had kept a secret that had been troubling her and eating away at her from the inside. Finally, unable to bear this burden, Dana decided to go to the police. She revealed that she and Mark Winger had a secret affair that began several months before Donna's death and continued for several weeks after her passing. According to Dana, Mark was so eager for a divorce that he once let slip that everything would be much simpler if Donna simply ceased to exist. Moreover, Dana claimed that Mark had carefully considered various ways to get rid of his wife and even suggested that his mistress join the conspiracy. Divorce was not an option, as the man feared losing his adopted daughter. By that time, Detective Charlie Cox was no longer completely convinced of Mark's innocence. Doubts had begun to creep in when, a few months after Donna's funeral, the widower visited the police station to request the return of his gun. At that moment, he also inquired whether the investigation had uncovered any new information about the case. Detective Cox found this question strange, as the investigation had long been closed. Mark visited the detective a second time to inform him about his marriage to his daughter's nanny. The man continued to visit the police station, and Cox realized that Winger was trying to find out if the police were conducting any additional checks. After the confession of Donna's close friend, Mark Winger was summoned for questioning again. He did not deny the fact of the extramarital affair. However, he called all the other accusations made by Dana Schultz dirty fabrications. "I was a good husband to Donna," Winger insisted. "My mistake was cheating on my wife with her friend. It was foolish and wrong, but I am only human, and people make mistakes." Mark also categorically denied asking Detective Cox about the progress of his deceased wife's case. But despite all of the man's statements, the investigation was officially reopened in 1999. Soon after, Mark filed a civil lawsuit against the company where Roger Harrington worked. He intended to hold the firm accountable for Donna's death and the actions of their employee, the taxi driver. In this regard, Winger's lawyer demanded that all case materials, including evidence and other documents, be handed over to him. It was then that it was discovered that some evidence had been lost over the 4 years. Instead, photographs of Donna and Roger were found, taken on that fateful day using an old Polaroid camera. The position of the bodies in the pictures did not match how Mark had described the events during the interrogation. Later, Detective Charlie Cox admitted that these photos had not been properly examined because he was not even aware of their existence. The photographs clearly showed Donna lying face down, although her husband claimed that he had held his wife in his arms, trying to provide assistance. Realizing the painful truth about the failure of the 1995 investigation, the police redoubled their efforts on the case. During the investigation, the detectives found more and more incriminating evidence. Roger's neighbor, Susan Collins, reported that on the eve of the tragedy, she had heard him arranging a meeting with someone. This explained the content of the note found in the taxi driver's car. Susan also added that Roger had mentioned to her his planned meeting with Mark. He had agreed to go to him to clarify all issues, including the situation with his dismissal. The young man left home at 3:30 p.m. In Roger's car, there was a knife and a tire iron. If he had really planned to commit murder, why didn't he take something from there with him, and instead used a hammer that happened to be at hand? Could he have foreseen that the necessary tool would find itself at the crime scene? When calling the 911 emergency service, Mark Winger reported that a stranger had attacked his wife. However, he personally gave the police the name of the attacker, Roger Harrington. The manager of the firm where Roger worked recalled that during the phone call, Mark had complained about the driver and insisted on a personal meeting with him. Usually, clients do not act this way, but simply pass their complaints on to the company's management. However, Winger was intent on a face-to-face conversation. Roger also wanted to clarify everything, so he asked his boss for permission to give Mark his phone number. An examination conducted by a criminalist showed that the blood traces on Mark's clothing matched the pattern of hammer blows. In contrast, no traces of Donna's blood were found on Roger Harrington's belongings. The diary entry about the horrific taxi ride was written in handwriting similar to Donna's. But later it turned out that it was not her hand. An expert confirmed that the diary entry belonged to Mark. 6 years after the crime, in 2001, Mark Winger was arrested and taken into custody pending trial. Detective Charlie Cox, who had once called him a hero, was now determined to prove that Mark was a ruthless killer. The investigation put forward a new version of events. Donna's unpleasant ride with Roger had given Mark the idea to plan his wife's murder, and at the same time get rid of the taxi driver, to make the whole story look more plausible. The parents of the deceased Donna realized that the evidence against their former son-in-law was compelling, but they still held out hope for his acquittal. They refused to believe that he could be the murderer of their daughter. After 13 hours of deliberation, the jury announced the verdict. Mark Winger was found guilty of intentionally taking the lives of 2 people, Donna Winger and Roger Harrington. In August 2002, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The defendant never admitted his guilt. But the story did not end there. 4 years later, in 2006, the imprisoned Mark Winger was charged with attempting to incite another inmate to commit 2 more serious crimes. Mark tried to persuade his 64-year-old cellmate, Terry Hebel, to help him kill Donna's friend, Dana Schultz, for testifying against him in court. In addition, Mark wanted revenge on his childhood friend, Jeff Regelman, for refusing to post $1 million bail for him. In Mark's cell, guards found 19 pages of handwritten text with a detailed action plan. The prisoner hoped that his cellmate, using his connections in the criminal world, would organize the kidnapping of Jeff Regelman in order to obtain a ransom from his family. Once the money was paid, Mark would order Jeff to be killed, and with the ransom money, hire a hitman to deal with Dana Schultz, the friend of the late Donna. Before her death, she would be forced to write a statement saying that she had slandered Mark Winger and that he was actually innocent. Fortunately, the sinister conspiracy failed, and in June 2007, Mark Winger again appeared before the court. The defendant assured the jury that his manuscripts were just fantasies that he never intended to bring to life. However, the court found him guilty of inciting kidnapping and murder and sentenced him to an additional 35 years in prison. This term was added to the already imposed life sentence. It is known that Mark's second wife, Rebecca, divorced him immediately after his conviction. She took back her maiden name, Simic. Rebecca officially adopted Bailey, Mark and Donna's adopted daughter. Left without a roof over her head, money, or support, Rebecca initially moved in with her brother. When the woman managed to improve her financial situation, she bought a separate home for herself and her children. From then on, she single-handedly raised her daughter and son. Rebecca and her children joined the local Southeastern Christian Church. Currently, the woman has a job and a decent income but has never remarried. In an interview in 2021, Rebecca admitted, "When Mark was put behind bars, I felt humiliated. I was embarrassed and ashamed, although I was not to blame for anything. Now Mark is physically alive, but for me and my family, he is dead." This story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Be sure to like and subscribe to support our channel. Thanks for watching and bye everyone.